While localthunk was developing Balatro, something very strange happened. He became addicted to making the cards in his game feel as, quote, tactile and juicy as possible. It doesn't take a lot of time to realize he achieved this and more. Both hovering your mouse over and clicking on the cards directly produces disturbingly satisfying sound effects. This seems minute at first, until you realize this level of care, this interest in making everything feel as good as it can, is extended to the entire game. From the rising pitch as your score counter multiplies, to the sleek shuffling of your cards, to the cash-in screen, and even the main menu button. It's flawless. You don't need me to tell you that normally this level of detail is reserved for gacha games rimmed with dailies, loot boxes, and the rest of the stuff we all watch Yangya bitch about to make the awful monetization feel as seamless as possible. Yet here in Balatro, it's all just right there, not to trick you into anything, merely content to make a great game feel good to play. Now, there's two reasons you might have clicked on this video. One, to see more Joker Girl, understandable. The second is to understand why everybody is talking about this game. I mean, it's even stuck its head out at the Game Awards of all places. I think there's a comparison for Balatro that illustrates kind of why it's so cherished now nicely. localthunk and his game remind me of Vampire Survivors in that both are titles that have a very direct connection to your dopamine sensors. It's almost silly to watch these games, but there's a reason they caught on as well as they have. Both were inspired by the satisfaction of casino games, and both have creators that refuse to do a face reveal, but that's neither here nor there. There's no fluff, is what I'm getting at. If it feels good, it's in the game. If it doesn't, it's not in the game. Balatro, put simply, is everything you love about roguelites. It's got buildcraft, replayability, and crazy combos. It might not look like that at first, far from it. There's nothing on screen that shouts modern indie. People passively watching you play could easily mistake it for some default solitaire game pre-installed on a computer. Yet dismissing it on surface appearance would be to save yourself from one of the most dangerously addicting games created since I made my channel 5 years ago. Whether this video is glowing praise or a cautionary tale is entirely up to your interpretation. In Balatro, you need to arrange your card hands to nab points, with each level giving you some discards in case there's nothing good to play. If, like me, you had no prior playing card knowledge, don't worry. Everything you need to understand these concepts is built right in. At any moment, you can hit the Run Info button and see what constitutes the different hand types. Moreover, each of these hand types can be leveled up. You might have a run that prioritizes flushes where you're constantly digging through your deck, rearranging your hand to be as optimal as possible. Card optimization seems obvious at a glance, but sticking with Balatro reveals its subtle secrets. We'll talk more about those later. Enemies in Balatro come in the form of blinds, scores you have to reach within a certain amount of turns. The boss versions of these have twists that are at best counters to builds you have to creatively solve, and at worst things that will absolutely top you. Almost like the game is generating the perfect opponent for you as your run progresses. If you're built such that your face cards get a ton of multipliers and extra chips, for example, you better hope you don't run into the boss that debuffs all face cards. Because of situations like this, it's usually best to have some sort of backup plan. Perhaps you leveled up one of the hand types enough that even without face cards, you can still rack up a decent score and win. While inherently annoying, it's these moments that prevent the player from just steamrolling the entire run. It may be irritating in the present to get completely floored by something engineered to defeat you, but considering what the game would be without obstacles like this, it's a smart inclusion. Except for that one boss that halves your multiplier and chips, which I'm convinced was put in by a disgruntled employee. If you're feeling brave, you can even skip non-boss blinds. Doing this without incentive would be awful since you lose access to prize money and shop opportunities, but thankfully each of these battles has its own special skip reward, like doubling your money, or even giving you more cards per hand next battle. This is often not worth it, admittedly, but you might occasionally see skips that are just too good to pass up. It's an extra level of strategy over an already complex game. It adds an interesting wrinkle to runs. It's a welcome addition. Also a welcome addition are the Joker cards. I'm not even sure how I got this far in the review without talking about these things. Jokers are Balatro's bread and butter, providing insane synergies and combinations that will have you generating runs for hours into the night, discovering new possibilities you'd never even thought of on the regular. In one instance, I had a deck built around a Joker that gained a multiplier off lucky cards, which are basically normal cards that have a chance to crit, giving me giant score increases every time I procced them. Combine this with the Ballot Joker that lets you trigger cards more than once, and you have a recipe for breaking the entire game in half. Breaking the game is a common phrase for praising certain roguelikes these days, I know, but by God if it isn't applicable here. Harder difficulties will practically require this too, as you re-roll shops and hoard prize money looking for the perfect Joker to complement your builds. These moments where your run goes so well even the bosses are powerless to stop you are some of the most fun you'll have in the game. Watching your score counter light up in flames and skyrocket into the millions like a numerical rocket ship never gets old. Because Jokers trigger from left to right at the top of the screen, you'll come to find the order they're arranged in is actually very important. A Joker that adds multiplicative buffs should typically go to the far right, for instance, since you want those additive multipliers to stack up first. If this sounds intimidating on some level, don't worry, a short amount of time with the game makes everything I'm saying crystal clear. I am not a math guy, but Balatro is good enough that it's tricking me into caring about it on some level, and it'll probably do the same for you. In addition to mechanics I've mentioned, there are multiple deck types. These are basically different characters you can select at the start of a playthrough. They don't always shake things up drastically, but their differences are noticeable. One might give an extra turn each battle to reach the score criteria, while another removes all face cards entirely. Some of these sound odd at first, but provide neat opportunities for your runs. Jokers that amplify number cards, for example, benefit from having no face cards in deck, since you're more likely to draw those in the first place. Each time you clear a run with one of these decks, you'll unlock progressively harder difficulties for said decks. These difficulty modifiers range from giving you less prize money to substituting Jokers for rental variants that'll only last for 5 battles. They are terrible. Moving along to audio, Balatro's soundtrack is one song, or rather one melody. It'll dynamically change based on what you're doing, like if you're in the shop or sorting through a spectral pack. While this does lend itself to a hypnotic feel perfectly in line with Balatro's addictive nature, it would have been nice to have more tracks for sure. But if you're like me, in which case, sorry to hear, it won't be long before you just set the music to 0 and have a podcast on in the other monitor anyway, so it is what it is. I have over 100 hours in Balatro across PC and mobile, and if I had to levy my main complaints, it'd be ones that apply to many roguelikes. At times, the game can feel like it's trying too hard to push you into a build you don't feel like playing. Maybe you just cleared a run with a flush deck, for instance, and want to mix it up a bit. Well, it's kind of hard when the next playthrough is still shoveling flush deck Jokers at you all of the time. Issues like this are inherent to any game within item pool, but I feel like it happens more often with Balatro than other titles. Also, on later difficulties, if you don't get at least some good RNG early on, you'll just fall flat on your face before the run even starts. That RNG is especially hard to line up at that point too, considering you'll get worse versions of Jokers like the rentals I mentioned, so the stars just truly have to be aligned for you to start building that momentum. Still, it's rare that this will stop you from perfecting your craft. Trying to fine-tune the perfect lineup of Jokers in hopes of ruining the final boss blind is an ever-present struggle you will be happy to be stuck in. Balatro wasn't made with the intention of being a smash hit game, simply one localthunk would have loved to play himself. In that process he accidentally struck gold, not only creating a game hundreds of thousands love, but demonstrating that often the game you want to make is the game others will want to play. So yeah, that's Balatro, a game that quickly and loudly consumed all of our free time. I'm probably just gonna go and play more of it now. I understand there's a mod for it that's taking off. Provided this video does well, I could do a review on that if you'd like. I review indies all the time and my content's not getting recommended as much as it used to, so if you want to help me out, be sure to subscribe and all that good stuff. I appreciate my patrons and I appreciate you. Thank you. I'll be seeing you all again very soon. Booba.